Carl Jung believed that human relationships are never simple exchanges of affection or attraction. Behind every bond lies an invisible current of psychology, ancient instincts, and unconscious patterns that draw us together. Love, in Jung's understanding, was not merely a feeling, it was a meeting of hidden forces within the psyche. When someone falls in love with you, Jung suggested, it is rarely about your surface presentation. It is almost always about something deeper, something their soul searches for, something their unconscious longs to complete. Jung once wrote that, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." In this transformation lies the mystery of why people fall in love. The heart does not choose randomly. It gravitates toward what it needs. Jung reduced this need to two fundamental reasons, though they often intertwine so seamlessly that people confuse one for the other. The first is projection, the hidden, unrecognized parts of ourselves that we cast upon others, seeing in them what we cannot yet see in ourselves. The second is resonance, the recognition of a shared pattern, a shared wound, or a shared longing that makes another soul feel like home. To understand projection, imagine a person who has never embraced their own creativity. They have buried it, dismissed it as impractical, or feared the vulnerability of expression. Then they meet someone whose life shines with that very quality, an artist, a dreamer, a free spirit. They fall in love, not because this artist is objectively better than anyone else, but because this person embodies their unlived life. Jung would say they are not truly in love with the other person, they are in love with the lost part of themselves. What they could not accept internally, they now worship externally. This is why Jung believed so many love stories are charged with intensity but also fragility. Projection creates enchantment. It blinds us, placing halos over ordinary human beings, making them seem almost divine. But because this love is built on a mirror rather than reality, it often cracks. The dream eventually collides with the truth. The artist is not just a vessel for one's unlived creativity but also a flawed and independent being. When this realization comes, love can fade, or it can deepen, if both people are willing to see each other not as projections, but as whole, imperfect selves. The second reason, resonance, is quieter but often more enduring. This is the love that forms not out of missing pieces, but out of recognition. Two people who have walked similar inner landscapes find each other, and without needing to explain, they understand. Their wounds are compatible. Their rhythms match. Sometimes this is born out of shared pain, two souls who have endured abandonment, loss, or struggle and recognize that ache in each other's eyes. Other times, it comes from shared strength, a parallel courage, a similar hunger for truth, a devotion to beauty, or a search for meaning. Unlike projection, resonance does not place another person on a pedestal. It does not say, "You have what I lack." Instead, it whispers, "You and I have traveled the same roads." The connection feels grounding, as though two separate melodies suddenly discover they were always part of the same song. Jung's distinction between projection and resonance is subtle but profound. Most people never pause to ask themselves which one has shaped their relationships. Yet this question matters because it determines whether love will be an awakening or an illusion. Projection can shatter when the other person's truth emerges. Resonance can deepen with time because it is rooted not in fantasy but in reality. But love is rarely pure. Most relationships are mixtures of both forces. At first, we project, falling for someone because they awaken something hidden within us. Over time, if the bond endures, resonance emerges, and we begin to love not the dream we imagined, but the real person before us. Jung believed this evolution of love is not just a personal journey but a spiritual one. It forces us to confront our shadows, recover our hidden selves, and discover the humanity we share with another. When someone falls in love with you, it is rarely just about your smile, your words, or your presence. It is about what you awaken in them. Sometimes you remind them of who they wish they could be. Other times, you reflect back who they already are. Either way, you are touching something deeper than choice. You are brushing against the unconscious. That, Jung believed, is why love feels so overwhelming. It is not just between two people, it is a conversation between two souls, each carrying histories, wounds, and desires far larger than the present moment. This is the beginning of Jung's insight into why people fall in love, not for the surface, not for the mask, but for the hidden currents within. For Jung, the reasons for falling in love cannot be explained solely by personal memory or surface attraction. He believed love is guided by something much older, something inherent in the psyche's architecture. At the core of his psychology lies a set of archetypes, universal patterns shaping how we dream, desire, and connect. Two central to human intimacy are the anima and the animus. Jung described the anima as the inner feminine image within every man, and the animus as the inner masculine image within every woman. These figures are not conscious inventions but part of the collective unconscious, ancient templates formed by generations of human experience. They influence who we notice, admire, and fall in love with. In Jung's words, when two people meet, it is not just two individuals encountering each other, but also these inner archetypes projecting their power. This explains the inexplicable rush of attraction for someone barely known. It is not reason but the anima or animus rising from the depths, whispering that the other person carries a soul fragment. Love becomes not simply companionship or preference, but recognition of an inner image, something carried within, suddenly brought to life by another's presence. But the anima and animus are not merely romantic illusions. They serve a purpose, pushing us toward wholeness. For Jung, each person carries both masculine and feminine qualities, yet we often suppress one side, clinging to a socially approved identity. A man may suppress tenderness, vulnerability, or creativity. A woman, her assertiveness, logic, or independence. These denied qualities remain alive inside, appearing as the anima or animus, seeking expression. Love is often the psyche's attempt to reclaim balance. Imagine a man raised to be hardened, rational, and detached, falling in love with a soft, intuitive, and feeling woman. To him, she seems radiant, almost otherworldly. He is drawn not only to her but to his disowned feminine depth. In her, he sees his lost wholeness. The reverse is also true. A woman taught to be nurturing but restrained may fall for a man embodying boldness, independence, or fierce conviction. She loves not only him, but the part of herself waiting to awaken. This, Jung said, is love's secret drama. When we fall in love, we rarely fall for a person alone. We fall into a mirror, an archetype, a chance to reclaim shadowed parts of ourselves. Love transforms because it demands this integration, pushing us to confront qualities once rejected but now essential. But herein lies the danger. These powerful archetypes can overwhelm us. When projected onto another, the beloved can appear more divine than human, a symbol rather than a person, a vessel for our inner world. Inevitably, reality shatters the illusion. The beloved is not a god or goddess but a flawed, unpredictable, imperfect human being. This disillusionment, though painful, is necessary, Jung believed. It forces us to withdraw the projection, reclaim the qualities given away, and love the person for who they are, not who our unconscious imagine them to be. This process is individuation, the journey of becoming whole. Love, taken seriously, is one of its great teachers. It reveals our lacks, shows us our fears, and invites us to grow into our potential. Every heartbreak, enchantment, and deep connection is, in Jung's philosophy, a lesson in self-discovery. So, when someone falls in love with you, it may be because you embody their anima or animus, the inner image they unknowingly carry. You are not just yourself but a mirror of their unconscious, a symbol of their missing wholeness. This does not mean their love is false, but that it is charged with a depth beyond choice or logic. It is the unconscious seeking balance, trying to illuminate the unlived parts of the soul. But love shaped by these archetypes is not only about need, it can evolve into resonance. When projection fades and the ideal collapses, genuine recognition becomes possible. Two souls, no longer blinded by archetypes but grounded in reality, can discover whether their connection can survive without illusions. If so, the love that follows is not the fire of projection but the warmth of truth. Jung shows us that love is both a danger and a gift. It can trap us in fantasy or awaken us to our hidden selves. It can shatter or make us whole. But it is never shallow. It is always a movement of the unconscious, a dialogue between what we are and what we might become. Carl Jung believed that no human being is whole without facing the shadow, the side of the psyche that holds everything we repress, deny, or fear within ourselves. The shadow is not simply evil. It is not only the aggression, envy, or selfishness we wish to hide. It also contains unlived life, the talents we never developed, the passions we suppressed, and the truths we were too afraid to admit. The shadow is the container of everything we could not bring into the light. And yet, the shadow has a strange power over our relationships. Jung observed that we are often irresistibly drawn to people who embody the very qualities we have buried within ourselves. This attraction is not always pleasant. It can feel electric, unsettling, even dangerous. When we meet someone whose presence awakens our shadow, we experience a mix of fascination and fear. We are pulled toward them not only for who they are, but because they hold a mirror to the parts of us we cannot see. Think of the quiet, disciplined individual who falls in love with someone wild and unpredictable, or the kind, self-sacrificing soul who is drawn to a lover who radiates selfish confidence. On the surface, these pairings make little sense. But Jung would argue that love is not rational. It is an instinctive force pushing us to confront the missing or disowned sides of ourselves. The disciplined one secretly longs for freedom. The selfless one longs to claim their own desires. The shadow, unrecognized, demands to be lived through another. This is why love can feel so dangerous. It brings us face to face with what we fear most within ourselves. The very qualities we admire or resent in another are often pieces of our own psyche crying out to be integrated. Jung wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. In love, this irritation often arrives wrapped in beauty, longing, or desire. What looks like passion may, at its core, be the shadow calling us home. But this entanglement can also lead to destruction if it is not understood. When we fall in love with our shadow, we may become blind. We may excuse cruelty, overlook red flags, or sacrifice ourselves, believing that the other person holds the key to our completeness. In truth, no one outside us can ever carry that responsibility. The shadow does not ask us to worship another. It asks us to reclaim what we have lost within ourselves. Consider the story of someone who falls for a partner who is brutally honest, even harsh. At first, the honesty feels refreshing, intoxicating, an antidote to their own habit of politeness and avoidance. They love this person because, through them, they are finally tasting the truth they never dared to speak. But over time, if they do not integrate this shadow quality into themselves, the relationship turns toxic. The partner's harshness becomes unbearable. What once seemed liberating becomes wounding. The only way forward is to recognize that what they admired was not the other's cruelty, but their own need for authenticity. Until they can claim that honesty for themselves, they will remain bound to the shadow in another. This is the paradox Jung saw in love. It is both a danger and a medicine. Falling in love with the shadow can break us, but it can also heal us if we learn its lesson. To love wisely is to ask, what part of myself am I chasing in this person? What part of my own shadow have I given away to them? When we begin to answer, love ceases to be mere infatuation and becomes a path of transformation. For Jung, the shadow was not meant to be destroyed but integrated. The same is true in love. The partners who stir our darkness are often the ones who help us grow. They show us where we are incomplete, where we are too one-sided, and where we are clinging to an image of ourselves that is too narrow. Love's greatest gift may not be comfort, but confrontation, the gentle or violent reminder that we are more than the persona we wear. So when someone falls in love with you, it may be because you awaken their shadow. You carry the qualities they cannot admit to themselves, and in your presence, they feel both terrified and alive. This love can be overwhelming because it feels like touching fire. Yet, if both people are willing to face what emerges, such a relationship can become one of the deepest teachers of self-knowledge. Love, then, is not only about light, it is about darkness. It is about the meeting of two shadows as much as two hearts. And it is in this meeting, Jung believed, that the possibility of true transformation arises. For only by embracing the shadow do we become whole. For Jung, love was never simply a matter of personal preference, chemistry, or even psychology. At its deepest, it was a spiritual experience. Every bond between two people mirrored something much larger, the human psyche's eternal search for unity. In Jung's system, this ultimate unity was symbolized by the self, the archetype of wholeness residing at the center of the unconscious. To move toward the self is to move toward balance, integration, and meaning. Love, more than almost anything else, propels us into this movement. When two people fall in love, especially intensely, it is not only attraction. It is the meeting of opposites, the merging of qualities that have long been separate. Masculine and feminine, light and shadow, order and chaos. These polarities are drawn to each other because, in the unconscious, they are already part of a whole. The soul longs to reunite what has been divided. Jung saw love as a natural ritual of this union, a symbolic rehearsal of the psyche's deepest task, which is to reconcile all opposites into one living self. This is why love often feels transcendent. People in love speak of feeling lifted out of time, sensing that destiny has arranged their meeting, and experiencing a wholeness they never knew before. These are not delusions, Jung argued. They are glimpses of the archetype of the self, shining through the relationship. The beloved becomes not just a person but a symbol of our own wholeness. To look into their eyes is to see not only them but the possibility of becoming complete. Yet Jung warned that this spiritual power can also be dangerous. When we mistake the beloved for the self itself, when we believe they are our wholeness rather than a symbol pointing toward it, we create idolatry. We place upon them the impossible burden of saving us. This is why so many relationships collapse under the weight of unrealistic expectations. We are not meant to find the self in another. We are meant to be awakened by them, then continue the inward journey. Even when relationships end, Jung saw them as profoundly meaningful. Every love, whether lasting or fleeting, contributes to the soul's education. The first overwhelming passion may reveal the anima or animus, stirring qualities we had buried. The second might awaken the shadow, forcing us to confront our fears. A later love may be quieter but deeper, offering resonance instead of projection. Each encounter is valuable, for each carries us closer to integration. The pain of heartbreak is often the moment the unconscious withdraws its projection, forcing us to face ourselves more honestly. In that pain, Jung believed, lies an initiation. Consider how many people describe their first great love as life-changing, even if it ended long ago. The psyche recognizes such events as markers in its spiritual unfolding. Love does not just bring pleasure or sorrow, it fosters growth. Every person we fall in love with shapes us, influencing who we become. Jung would say they are all figures in the great drama of individuation, sent not by chance but by the deep currents of the unconscious, guiding us toward wholeness. In this way, Jung elevated love beyond the personal. It is not merely a story between two individuals, it is part of humanity's oldest ritual, the union of opposites. Every myth, from the marriage of gods to the joining of heaven and earth, reflects this same pattern. Lovers repeat it in their own lives, often unaware that their passion echoes something cosmic. The union they seek is not only with each other, but with the self. Yet, Jung never reduced love to a mere symbol. He insisted that love must also be lived in the real world, with all its imperfections. The spiritual force of love does not excuse us from the practical work of commitment, honesty, and forgiveness. In fact, it demands it. The divine must be grounded in the human, or it becomes destructive. Love that soars without roots is like fire without a hearth. It burns everything it touches. Thus, for Jung, love is both the most human and the most spiritual of experiences. It mirrors the psyche's longing for unity, but also tests our ability to live truthfully with another person. To love is to walk a path between heaven and earth, to glimpse eternity in another's face, yet remember they are human, to find in them the self, yet return to ourselves. So when someone falls in love with you, it may be because you awaken not only their shadow or their anima, but their deepest longing for unity. To them, you may appear as the missing half of their soul, the embodiment of wholeness they cannot yet find within. Whether the relationship lasts or fades, that encounter has spiritual weight. It is a signpost pointing them toward their own completeness, their own self. This is why love matters so profoundly in Jung's philosophy. It is never accidental. It is always part of the soul's journey toward becoming. Carl Jung's vision of love was never sentimental. He did not describe it as a fairy tale, nor reduce it to simple attraction. Instead, he saw love as one of the most profound forces shaping the human journey, because every act of love is a movement of the unconscious toward wholeness. When people fall in love, it is rarely for the reasons they imagine. It is not only beauty, or kindness, or compatibility that binds hearts. It is the deeper call of the psyche, seeking something lost, something hidden, something waiting to be integrated. We have seen how love begins with projection, the anima and animus casting their images onto another, making them shine with an almost divine radiance. We fall because we recognize in them a part of ourselves we never lived. Then, love confronts us with the shadow, the qualities we fear or deny, suddenly alive in the person we cannot resist. Love, in this way, unsettles us. It breaks the walls we build around our identity and shows us how incomplete we are. But when projection fades, when the illusions collapse, what remains is resonance. The recognition of another soul, not as an archetype, not as a shadow, but as a living being. This is the turning point. Will love die when the dream dissolves, or will it mature into truth? Jung believed that only when we see the other clearly, stripped of our unconscious projections, can we truly love them for who they are. And this shift, from fantasy to reality, is what transforms love from enchantment into devotion. Yet even when love fails, even when the bond shatters under the weight of disappointment, Jung insisted that it is not wasted. Every love carves a path toward individuation. Every heartbreak forces us to reclaim the parts of ourselves we had given away. Every moment of longing, every joy, every wound is a step in the soul's education. To have loved deeply, even if briefly, is to have touched the currents of the self, however imperfectly. This is why Jung wrote that the greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved but only outgrown. Love is one of those problems. It cannot be mastered, explained, or neatly contained. It is not a puzzle to solve but a mystery to grow through. Its contradictions, pain and joy, light and darkness, union and separation, are not flaws but the very essence of its power. And so, when people fall in love with you, remember this, they do so for two reasons, both hidden in the depths of their being. Either you awaken in them the missing part of themselves, what they have not yet lived, what they have kept in shadow, or you resonate with the truths they already carry, the secret landscapes they recognize as their own. One is projection, the other is recognition. One begins with illusion, the other deepens into reality. But both matter, because both are steps in the same journey, the journey toward wholeness. Love is not about possession. It is not about perfection. It is about transformation. To love is to allow the unconscious to speak, to let the hidden rise to the surface, to let life itself move through us in ways we cannot control. This is why it overwhelms us, why it feels sacred, why it wounds and heals in the same breath. For Jung, love was the most human way we encountered the divine within ourselves. It is where the personal and the eternal meet, where two souls discover that their longing is not only for each other, but for something greater, the self, the unity that underlies all opposites. And so, the final truth is this: people fall in love not simply because of who you are, but because of what their soul finds through you. Sometimes you are their mirror. Sometimes you are their echo. Sometimes you are their fire, sometimes their wound. But always, you are part of their becoming. This is why love, even when it ends, is never meaningless. It is always carrying us closer to who we are meant to be. There is a side of yourself you do not show the world. You may think it is gone, buried under years of self-control, manners, and social training, but it remains. It watches you from the edge of your consciousness, sometimes whispering in your dreams, sometimes slipping out in moments of anger, fear, or sudden inspiration. Carl Jung called this part of you the shadow. It is not darkness for the sake of darkness. It is everything you have pushed away, hidden, or denied about yourself, your impulses, raw desires, repressed emotions, and even untapped strengths. Jung believed that until you face this shadow, your life will remain incomplete. You will walk through the world with a mask, never truly knowing why certain patterns repeat or why you feel an unexplained emptiness. The shadow forms early. From childhood, we learn what is acceptable and what is not. We are rewarded for being polite, obedient, and predictable. We are punished or shamed when we express something that does not fit the script. A child who cries too much may learn to hide sadness. A child who shows anger might be told they are bad, so they swallow their rage until it hardens into resentment. Over time, entire pieces of our personality are exiled. But nothing we bury inside disappears. It remains alive, influencing our choices from behind the scenes. Jung saw this as one of the greatest tragedies of modern life. We are taught to show only fragments of who we are, while the rest of our being grows in the dark, misunderstood, and feared. You can see the shadow at work in moments when your emotions seem disproportionate to the situation. You lash out over something trivial and later wonder why you lost control. You feel an irrational dislike for someone you barely know, sensing something irritating without reason. Often, what we hate in others reflects what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. Jung called this projection. Instead of seeing our own envy, arrogance, or fear, we assign these traits to someone else and react as if they are the problem. In doing this, we avoid the uncomfortable truth: the shadow is not out there, it is inside us. For Jung, confronting the shadow was not about moral perfection, but about becoming whole. The shadow contains qualities that, if integrated, could bring immense strength. Hidden aggression could be transformed into assertiveness. Denied selfishness could teach you to prioritize your needs healthily. Even envy could reveal what you truly desire. But to claim these hidden treasures, you must step into the inner darkness without flinching. Facing the shadow is not easy. It demands honesty that can feel like self-betrayal. You may have built your identity on being kind, selfless, or disciplined, only to discover a part of you that is selfish, cruel, or chaotic. The first instinct is to reject it, to say, "This is not me." Yet Jung warned that the more we fight the shadow, the stronger it becomes. Its energy does not vanish, it turns against us, appearing in nightmares, sabotaging relationships, or erupting unexpectedly. What we refuse to face, we are doomed to repeat. The path to integration begins with observation. Watch your reactions. Notice when someone irritates you without a clear reason. Ask yourself what part of you they might be reflecting. Pay attention to your dreams, where the shadow often speaks in symbols and images. Keep a journal, not for judgment, but to record these encounters honestly. Over time, patterns emerge. You may see that the traits you despise most in others are those you have long suppressed. But Jung's vision went beyond self-awareness. He believed the shadow is linked to your life's purpose. The qualities you reject often hold the keys to your meant path. Perhaps you were taught to silence your ambition, so you live a safe but unfulfilled life. Your shadow might hold the boldness to take risks and pursue something greater. Perhaps you were told to be realistic, so you shut down your imagination. Your shadow might be guarding your creative force. The shadow does not just reveal what you fear, it reveals what you need. Society does not make this journey easier. We live in a world that rewards surface appearances. We are told to curate our image, to show only the polished, acceptable parts of ourselves. Social media amplifies this pressure, creating a constant performance of happiness, success, and certainty. In such a climate, admitting weakness or inner conflict feels dangerous. Yet Jung would argue that without embracing these hidden parts, you will remain a stranger to yourself. The cost of denying the shadow is a life lived on autopilot, chasing goals that are not truly yours. Shadow work is not a one-time event, it is an ongoing dialogue with yourself. Each time you face a part of your shadow, you reclaim a piece of your soul. Over years, this builds into a profound transformation. You begin to act from authenticity rather than habit. You stop fearing your emotions and learn to channel them. Triggers lose their power, for you understand what they were awakening within you. This is the beginning of true freedom, not the absence of struggle, but the ability to move through it with self-awareness. With each step into the shadow, you come closer to the life that was waiting for you, not the life prescribed by others, not the one built to please or impress, but the one that resonates with every hidden part of your being. The deeper you go into your shadow, the more you will understand why your life unfolded the way it did. The people who hurt you, the failures that crushed you, the chances you were too afraid to take, they all carry the fingerprints of the parts of yourself you abandoned. The shadow is not just a personal archive of your inner life, it is the architect of your unconscious choices. Until you bring it into the light, you are playing a game you are unaware of, following rules you never agreed to. Jung often compared the shadow to the myths of ancient cultures. In countless stories, the hero must descend into the underworld, confront a monster, and return with a treasure. This was never just fantasy. It was the human psyche telling its own truth. The monster is the shadow. The underworld is your subconscious mind. The treasure is the strength, creativity, and clarity you gain when you stop running from yourself. But the journey is never safe. Just as in the myths, the shadow will test you, confuse you, and at times make you doubt your return. One of the most painful truths you will face in this work is that the shadow is not purely made of what you call bad. It also contains the very best of you, the talents you were too shy to show, the dreams you abandoned to fit in, the voice you silenced to avoid conflict. These are called your golden shadows. They are no less hidden, but they are hidden for different reasons. Maybe your gift made others uncomfortable. Maybe your joy was met with envy. Maybe your strength frightened someone who wanted control over you. So you hid it. And in hiding it, you began to believe you never had it. This is why the shadow can feel so deceptive. It is not just a pile of dark emotions. It is a storage room for everything that was unwelcome in the world you grew up in. Part of your life's purpose will always be tied to unlocking it. Bringing these qualities back is not easy because it will require you to become someone unfamiliar to those around you. People might not like the version of you who says no. They might not support the version of you who takes up space, refuses to be overlooked, or dares to succeed. Integrating the shadow will inevitably disrupt your relationships because the person you are becoming cannot live by the same silent agreements that kept you small. This is where many people turn back. They begin the work, they see what is hiding in the dark, and they feel the pull to bring it out, but the cost seems too high. So they return to the mask, telling themselves they are fine as they are. But that is not peace. That is stagnation disguised as stability. You may avoid temporary discomfort, but you also avoid growth. You avoid becoming whole. The truth is that your shadow will demand your attention whether you face it or not. Suppressed anger can turn into illness. Unacknowledged desires can warp into addictions. Denied talents can sour into bitterness toward those who live boldly. You might think you are keeping your shadow under control, but it is steering your life from the depths. The more you refuse it, the louder it knocks. Jung's work was radical because he did not see the shadow as something to destroy. He saw it as something to embrace. The integration process is not a battle, it is a reconciliation. This means having the courage to sit with the parts of yourself that make you uncomfortable, not to justify them, but to understand them. It means asking your anger what it is protecting, asking your fear what it is warning you about, and asking your jealousy what it is pointing you toward. Every dark emotion carries information. When you start listening, the shadow transforms from an enemy into a guide. As you walk further into this process, you might notice something strange. Life starts giving you tests that mirror the parts of your shadow you are working on. If you have been avoiding conflict, you may find yourself in situations where you are forced to speak up. If you have been hiding your talent, you may be placed in a position where you must display it. These moments are not coincidences, they are invitations. Each time you act in alignment with the parts you have reclaimed, you stitch yourself back together. And with each stitch, the meaning of your life becomes clearer. You stop chasing vague goals because you feel you should. You start moving toward experiences that feel alive in your bones. You begin to see that your purpose is not something you find out there. It is something you uncover within. The shadow was never just an obstacle. It was the map. The moment you begin to live with your shadow instead of against it, the world seems to shift. Life doesn't necessarily become easier, but you are no longer at war with yourself, so external battles lose their power to break you. You stop wasting energy on self-denial and no longer need constant distraction to numb the ache of incompleteness. The internal noise quiets, not because the shadow disappears, but because it is finally acknowledged. You begin to notice patterns, how you unconsciously repeated your parents' fears, how you made choices to avoid shame rather than seek joy, how you chose friends and lovers who mirrored familiar roles instead of truly fitting you. With each realization, the illusion that your life just happened dissolves. You see the architecture of your life and your own hand in its creation. This is painful because it forces you to accept responsibility, but it is also freeing because responsibility is power. If you built this life unconsciously, you can rebuild it consciously. The shadow teaches that freedom is not about doing whatever you want, but about no longer being driven by unseen forces. It is about acting from choice, not compulsion. You can leave a toxic relationship without being pulled back by the fear of abandonment. You can take career risks without the memory of failure strangling your courage. You can express love without cynicism, no longer ruled by the fear of its loss. Paradoxically, the more you integrate your shadow, the more you will feel. The protective numbness melts. Old grief resurfaces. Forgotten anger stirs. Buried joy surges, sometimes frighteningly so, because it feels too big, too unfamiliar. This flood of emotion is not a setback, but the body's way of thawing. You are feeling again because you are alive again. The outside world may resist your change. People comfortable with your old self may push back, accusing you of becoming selfish, arrogant, or distant. They are not wrong in seeing you as different, you are different. But their judgment reflects the role you played in their lives, not who you truly are. When you step out of an old role, you disrupt other scripts. Not everyone will want to rewrite them. Some will leave. Let them. If they cannot see your true self, they were only ever in love with the mask. A deeper truth emerges. The shadow was never a prison, but a messenger. Its darkness concealed a gift meant to be opened slowly, over a lifetime. Every confrontation with it strengthens you, makes you more honest, more at home in your own skin. You realize that your greatest fears often hold the potential for healing. Integration is not a finish line, but a way of living. You will meet new shadows as you grow, in love, success, failure, and loss. But instead of hiding, you will greet them, asking what they have to teach. Life stops feeling like a series of battles and starts feeling like a series of initiations. Each challenge deepens your self-knowledge. Each tended wound becomes wisdom. You may even feel gratitude for past pain, not because it was good or fair, but because it shaped you into someone who sees what others miss, someone who can bear their own being without breaking, someone who knows that true safety is built within. That is the shadow's gift when you stop running. That is what it means to become whole. When you finally step into the open with your shadow at your side, you realize how different the air feels. It is not lighter as people imagine, not some sudden bliss that erases all struggle. Instead, it is heavier, but in a sacred way, the weight of truth resting on your shoulders. You carry yourself differently because you know you are no longer pretending. You are no longer bending yourself into shapes to fit into someone else's comfort zone. Every step you take feels deliberate, anchored. This is what it means to walk in your own gravity. At this point, life tests you. It always does when you cross a threshold of growth. The test might come as betrayal, loss, or an opportunity that forces you to choose between the old version of yourself and the one you have become. Most people fail these tests not because they lack strength, but because they do not yet trust the person they have uncovered within. But you have sat in the fire of your own becoming. You have walked through the noise of self-doubt and the temptation to turn back. So when the test arrives, you do not flinch. You remember who you are. The changes are subtle at first. You notice that when someone criticizes you, the sting is brief. It no longer spirals into a storm inside your head. When a situation turns uncertain, you no longer feel the desperate need to control every outcome. There is a patience in you now, a willingness to let life reveal itself without ripping the curtain open. You can sit with discomfort without letting it devour you. This is the quiet power that people around you will sense but not always understand. And then something remarkable happens. You begin to meet others who are also carrying their shadows with dignity. These are not people who have lived perfect lives, quite the opposite. They have been broken in their own ways, and in being broken, they have learned the art of rebuilding. Conversations with them feel different. There is no posturing, no need to hide the messy parts of life. You speak the same unspoken language of those who have met themselves in the dark and returned with something worth sharing. This is when you understand that integration is not a solitary act. The more whole you become, the more you draw to yourself those who are also on the path. It is not about forming a circle of people who think the same way, but about finding those who have earned their truth the hard way, through living, through losing, through loving and surviving. And in their presence, you realize that your journey was never only about you. Your wholeness becomes a mirror for others, an invitation for them to stop running from their own shadows. There will still be days when the darkness inside stirs again. Perhaps you hear an old voice, or a memory reopens like an old wound. But you no longer treat these moments as proof of failure. They are reminders that healing is not erasing, it is learning to live fully with what has happened to you. It is remembering that scars are not a sign of weakness, but of endurance. You carry them as proof that you are still here. In time, your life starts to feel less like a survival story and more like an unfolding. You begin to see beauty in places you once overlooked, in a stranger's kindness, in the quiet of early mornings, in the way the wind carries the scent of rain. These moments are not distractions from the pain of the world. They are the balance to it. They are proof that even after all you have faced, there is still something worth being here for. And this is the final truth the shadow gives you. Wholeness does not make you untouchable. Life will still hurt. People will still disappoint. Plans will still fall apart. But none of it will ever undo you, because you now know that the strength you sought outside was always buried within. You are not unbreakable because nothing can touch you. You are unbreakable because even when you break, you will not lose yourself. There is a moment in every life when you realize the world is not here to protect you. It is not a cruel revelation, though it may feel like one at first. It is simply the nature of existence. You arrive in this life raw, trusting, full of unspoken expectations, that love will always be pure, that promises will be kept, that kindness will be repaid in kind. And for a while, these illusions can hold. But eventually, reality reveals itself in the form of betrayal, loss, and the subtle erosion of the safety you thought was guaranteed. This is the first breaking. It can come early, in childhood, when someone you depend on fails you. It can come later, in the form of heartbreak, financial ruin, or a sudden shift in life's course. The form does not matter. What matters is the shattering, the recognition that the people you thought could never hurt you can, and sometimes will. That the systems you believed in can collapse without warning. That the person you thought you were is not always the one who will survive the storms ahead. In that moment, you have a choice. You can fight to hold on to the illusions, patching them together with denial and hope, pretending nothing has changed. Or you can step fully into the pain, acknowledging that the ground beneath you is not as solid as you once believed. This choice is not easy. The second path, the one that embraces the truth, will feel like walking into darkness with no guarantee of light at the other end. But it is the only path that leads to the kind of strength that cannot be taken from you. Walking into that darkness means meeting parts of yourself you have avoided for years. The anger you buried because it was not acceptable to show, the fear you hid because you thought it made you weak, the longing you denied because it felt too vulnerable. You begin to realize that these pieces are not enemies to be destroyed, but fragments of your own wholeness that you have been taught to disown. Facing them is uncomfortable, sometimes unbearable, but each time you look directly at what you fear inside yourself, the shadows lose a little of their power. The world will not applaud this work. There is no public celebration for a person who learns to sit quietly with their pain. No parade for the one who chooses to stop pretending. In fact, you may find that some people pull away when you begin to change. Your new honesty may unsettle them, not because you have wronged them, but because it forces them to confront their own illusions. It can be lonely work, this dismantling of your false self. But it is in the silence of this loneliness that you begin to hear your own voice again, the one you buried under years of noise. As you peel away these layers, you also notice how much of your suffering came from resisting reality. You wanted people to be what they could not be. You wanted situations to unfold the way you had scripted them in your mind. Every unmet expectation became a wound, every deviation from your plan a source of outrage. But reality is indifferent to our scripts. The more tightly we cling to how we think things should be, the more we suffer. When you begin to release this grip, something shifts. It is not that you stop caring. It is that you stop breaking yourself against what you cannot control. This is not a philosophy of passivity. It is not about letting life trample over you without resistance. It is about discernment, knowing what is worth your fight and what is simply the river of life moving in its own direction. You learn to reserve your energy for battles that matter and to let go of the ones that are only the ego clinging to the need to be right or in control. In doing so, you discover a kind of freedom you didn't know existed, the freedom to meet life as it is, not as you demand it to be. In time, this practice becomes less of an effort and more of a way of being. You no longer react to every slight, every disappointment, every perceived insult. There is a quiet strength in you now, a steadiness that others may mistake for detachment. But it is not detachment, it is rootedness. You are no longer tossed around by every wave because you have anchored yourself in something deeper than circumstance. You have stopped looking for the world to validate your worth. You carry it with you. And this is where the transformation begins to take root. You stop needing to be invincible. You realize that being untouchable is not about avoiding pain, but about no longer letting pain define you. It is about seeing clearly that life will hurt you, sometimes deeply, but that this hurt does not have to be the end of you. The person you were before the breaking might not survive, but the person who emerges afterward is not weaker. They are forged in fire, tempered by the reality of what it means to live. When you understand this, fear loosens its grip. You stop running from the possibility of loss because you know you can survive it. You stop clinging so desperately to what you have because you understand that holding on too tightly often destroys the very thing you want to preserve. You meet life with open hands, knowing that whatever comes will shape you, and whatever leaves will make space for what's next. You are no longer the person who believed nothing bad could happen. You are no longer the person who thought safety was something guaranteed by others. You are the one who has seen the truth and chosen to live anyway. And in that choice, you have found something far greater than safety. You have found resilience. You have found yourself. There is a strange silence that hangs between people who have known each other for years. This silence is not born of comfort, but of something darker, unspoken resentment, hostility disguised as politeness, a quiet, unadmitted hatred. Carl Jung wrote that every soul carries a shadow, and the closer we draw to others, the more that shadow can reveal itself in subtle, corrosive ways. Hatred from a stranger wounds us, but it is clear, direct, and often passes quickly. Hatred from someone close, a friend, sibling, partner, or confidant, seeps in more slowly. It is poison disguised as wine. Recognizing this hidden truth helps us understand the complexity of human bonds. Jung believed that we rarely show our entire selves to the world. We construct a persona, a mask we wear to appear acceptable to society and even loved ones. But beneath the mask lies the shadow, our denied desires, envies, fears, and aggression. When suppressed, the shadow waits for cracks to emerge in our relationships, and there it reveals itself. When someone close secretly despises you, it is often not because of your actions, but because your existence has become a mirror they cannot face. Perhaps you represent a path not taken, your happiness reminds them of their loneliness, or your strength makes them feel weak. Their resentment is not about you, but about what you awaken in them. Yet, the hostility is directed toward you, hidden behind smiles and half-hearted gestures of care, revealed only when their mask slips. Jung saw this in how envy operates. Rarely confessed, envy hides because admitting it would expose vulnerability. Instead, it transforms into passive aggression, withdrawal, and subtle sabotage. A person who secretly hates you may not strike openly, but their energy shifts. They remind you of your flaws, diminish your triumphs, and make you doubt yourself. They whisper, they corrode. The danger lies not only in them, but in us. When someone close harbors hatred, our first instinct is denial. We cling to the idea of lingering affection, believing the bond cannot be so fragile. This denial is a refusal to look at the shadow. We prefer the comfort of illusion, even when the truth gnaws at us. We excuse coldness as tiredness, cruelty as humor, and indifference as distraction. Slowly, we allow ourselves to be diminished, because being hated by someone dear feels unbearable. Yet the shadow cannot be denied forever. Jung warned that what we refuse to see in others and ourselves eventually rises destructively. If we do not recognize hidden hatred, we internalize its effects. We start believing we are less worthy of love, respect, and security. Unacknowledged hatred becomes the soil for self-doubt. But here, philosophy meets compassion. Recognizing that someone close secretly despises us is not about condemnation or anger. Jung understood that hatred is tangled with fear, longing, inadequacy, and unmet needs. A person who secretly hates may be suffering greatly. Their hostility is not only a wound directed at us, but a reflection of their internal war. Seeing this does not mean we should ignore their actions. Jung's path was one of integration, bringing the hidden into the light, naming it, confronting it, and refusing illusion. If people secretly despise us, their shadows have crossed into our lives, and we must walk carefully, not with bitterness, but clarity, not with paranoia, but with the strength of truth. The first step is awareness, noticing the subtle gestures, the fractures in trust, the uneasy silence where warmth once existed. Buried hatred leaks through tone, body language, and the erosion of care. Noticing it is painful, but ignoring it is far worse. Jung offers a path not only to self-protection, but to a deeper understanding of the human soul. Even in hatred and betrayal, there is something to be learned about the fragility of love, the weight of envy, and the unspoken battles that shape those closest to us. When someone dear secretly despises us, the question is not only how to respond, but how to see, clearly, without illusion, bitterness, or self-deception. This is the beginning of wisdom in relationships, not fearing the shadow, but recognizing it, and in doing so, protecting our own spirit. If there is one place where hidden hatred takes root, it is within families. Jung observed that the family is where the unconscious first writes its scripts, shaping our desires, fears, and the masks we wear. It is also where love and resentment grow together, inseparable as vines entwined around a tree. A sibling may smile at your success yet secretly feel eclipsed by it. A parent may encourage you outwardly yet harbor bitterness that their own life never reached the same heights. An old friend may congratulate you, but their eyes reveal something else: envy, a tightening of the jaw, a lingering pause. These are the whispers of the shadow breaking through the mask. Jung would remind us that these shadows are not pure evil. They are the parts of ourselves exiled from consciousness. A brother who resents your freedom is wrestling with his own captivity. A friend who grows cold in the face of your joy is struggling with their own loneliness. Yet, when these shadows remain unacknowledged, they create hollow relationships. Affection is still performed, but the foundation is weakened, and cracks appear in moments of truth. The pain of such realization is profound because family and friendship are supposed to be sanctuaries. To discover hatred within them is to feel the world tremble. It is not only the hostility that wounds, but the betrayal of expectation, the collapse of the illusion that love is safe simply because it comes from loved ones. Jung would tell us this collapse is necessary. Only by seeing through illusion do we encounter people as they truly are, not as we wish them to be. There is a duality in hidden hatred. It can coexist with love. A sister may resent you deeply but still protect you fiercely. A friend may envy your life yet still miss you when you are gone. This duality confuses us because we believe emotions should be pure, consistent, and singular. But the psyche is a chorus of conflicting voices. Love and hate often dwell together, not as enemies, but as uneasy companions. To accept this is to see others through the lens of reality, not idealization. Those who secretly despise us are not monsters. They are human, fragmented, divided, and at war with themselves. Their resentment may wound us, but it is also a reminder of how fragile the bonds of affection are, how much effort it takes to hold love above envy, and how rare it is to find love without hidden hostility. This recognition does not mean we must cut ties. Jung's philosophy was about integration, acknowledging what is there without being consumed by it. If we can see resentment for what it is, if we can name the shadow, we are no longer helpless. We can choose how close to stand, how much of our soul to give, how much energy to protect. Awareness grants freedom, even when love carries its fractures. Yet, awareness also carries loneliness. To see clearly is to lose some innocence, the comfort of believing everyone dear to us wishes us well. But Jung would argue this loneliness is the price of maturity. To awaken is to stand in the truth, and the truth is that even the closest relationships can carry a quiet undercurrent of hatred. Still, within this truth lies liberation. Once you have faced the shadow in others, you are no longer bound by their hidden hostility. Their resentment no longer defines your worth, nor does their unspoken hatred infect your spirit. You learn to see it as theirs to carry. You learn that love is not guaranteed, that loyalty is not pure, but that your strength lies in discerning what is real and building your life around those rare bonds where love is not poisoned by envy. Thus, in the family that resents, in the friend who grows cold, we see not only the hidden hatred of others but also the deeper truth of the human heart. We are creatures of contradiction, carrying both devotion and hostility, and it is in navigating this tension that we find wisdom. This is why Jung insisted we confront the shadow, both in others and in ourselves. Until we recognize the possibility of hidden hatred in those closest to us, we remain children in the world of relationships, trusting blindly, hoping endlessly, and suffering quietly. To see the shadow is painful, but it is the first step toward authentic connection, toward bonds chosen with clarity rather than illusion. The recognition deepens. The people we love may also secretly despise us, and this does not make them demons, it makes them human. It is in how we face this truth that our own humanity is tested. If hidden hatred within family and friendships is painful, its presence in intimate love can be devastating. In romantic bonds, we offer not only companionship but also our most vulnerable selves. To sense that our closest companion might secretly despise us is to feel as though life's foundation has cracked. Jung frequently wrote about the dangers of projection in love. We rarely see our partners as they are. We project our longings onto them. A man might see his anima, his idealized inner feminine, in his beloved. A woman might see her animus, her inner masculine, embodying her desired strength and wisdom, in her partner. Initially, this projection is intoxicating. Love burns brightly when the other seems to embody everything we lack. But no mask lasts forever. Gradually, the beloved's humanity, and with it, their shadow, emerges. Flaws, vulnerabilities, and insecurities, truths we never wanted to see, surface. If we cannot meet these truths with compassion, resentment takes root. The once perfect beloved becomes a mirror of our disappointments. We resent their weakness because it reflects our own. We hate their freedom because it highlights our dependence. We envy their achievements because they echo our unfulfilled potential. Hidden hatred in love begins as disillusionment, not cruelty. What was projected outward collapses inward, and the beloved, once carrying our dream, now carries our shadow, becoming the target of our internal battles. It manifests subtly, a withheld compliment, a tone laced with contempt, sudden impatience with once cherished gestures. The fracture isn't always signaled by an affair or a fight. Sometimes, it's the lingering silence, the rehearsed affection, the subtle absence of delight in your presence. Love poisoned by secret hatred often dies quietly, like a candle suffocated by its smoke. Jung believed intimacy forces the shadow into the open because love strips us of our defenses. With a partner, our masks are thinner, our personas more fragile. This closeness makes love beautiful, but also dangerous. We expose our vulnerabilities, hoping for care, but also our flaws, weaknesses, and inadequacies. If our partner cannot accept these parts of us, resentment grows. If we cannot face their shadow, we begin to hate what we once adored. Yet Jung didn't see this as hopeless. He believed love's true task was not maintaining the illusion of perfection, but enduring its collapse without fleeing. If partners recognize each other's shadow and remain, love deepens into something real, stronger than projection. If the shadow is denied, hidden, unspoken, it becomes the rot that consumes affection, leaving only bitterness. To suspect your partner secretly despises you is to confront a deep fear, that even in intimacy, we are not fully safe. Yet, this confrontation can be a doorway. In acknowledging human contradiction, authentic love can begin. Truly loving someone is not just adoring their light, but living alongside their shadow, enduring their envy, frustrations, and resentments without collapsing. It is remaining, not because the illusion holds, but because the truth is seen and embraced. Few achieve this. It requires immense courage. But when it happens, it creates a bond impervious to secret hatred because the shadow is acknowledged, not denied. Still, many cannot face this work. They remain in relationships where affection mingles with resentment, and intimacy is stained with unspoken hostility. Here, the suffering is greatest. Unlike a sibling or friend, an intimate partner shares our days, nights, home, and bed. To lie beside someone harboring hidden hatred is to feel it in the air you breathe. Jung would say the task is not to drown in despair, but to turn inward. The other's hatred reveals something within us, our acceptance of illusion, our fear of abandonment, our reluctance to confront our own shadow. The resentment is not only theirs, it is part of the human story, where love is never pure, and intimacy carries danger. Seeing this clearly is the first step toward freedom. Once the illusion breaks, you are no longer bound by unspoken hostility. You can choose to face it together with courage or protect yourself by leaving. Both paths are honest, both honor the truth. Hidden hatred in love, as devastating as it is, becomes a teacher. It strips away fantasy and forces us to encounter the complexity of human affection, how love and hate, tenderness and resentment, coexist within the same heart. Denying this is remaining a child in love. Accepting it is growing, seeing, and loving with eyes wide open. When someone close secretly despises us, the wound is not merely external. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, their hidden hostility seeps into our psyche. We begin to carry it as our own. This is one of the most dangerous effects of unacknowledged hatred. It poisons the bond and reshapes the soul that suffers it. Carl Jung wrote that one person's unconscious is never entirely separate from another's. When two lives are intertwined through family, friendship, or intimacy, their shadows touch. If we are not careful, the shadow of another can slip quietly into us, making us doubt what once felt certain. We absorb their coldness, contempt, and envy, and in time, may mistake it for the truth about ourselves. The signs are subtle. You may find yourself silencing your joy, shrinking your accomplishments, and muting your light because you sense it unsettles them. You may hesitate before speaking, rehearsing your thoughts in fear of dismissal or sarcasm. Over time, you no longer need their disapproval, it lives within you. Their hidden hatred has taken root, shaping a second voice that whispers against your worth. This is how unspoken resentment becomes internalized. It is as though a fragment of their shadow has crossed into you. Jung would say that what we fail to confront outwardly returns inwardly with doubled force. By refusing to see that someone close harbors hatred, we allow their shadow to live rent-free in our unconscious. We become the jailer of our own spirit, enforcing limits that were never ours. The danger deepens. Once their hostility is inside us, we echo it. We turn their contempt into self-contempt. We treat ourselves with the same indifference, cruelty, and erosion of dignity that we once felt from them. This is how the hidden hatred of another becomes our own shadow. Jung warned that to live without recognizing these dynamics is to live half asleep, mistaking the voice of another's resentment for fate. It is not fate, it is projection, absorption, the unguarded blending of souls. The task before us is to disentangle what is ours from what belongs to them. This is not easy. Bonds, especially close ones, are charged with loyalty and guilt. To admit that someone you love secretly despises you is to feel disloyal, as though betraying them by naming what you sense. So you remain silent, convincing yourself that you are imagining it, that you are too sensitive, that surely love must still be there. But silence deepens the invasion. The more you deny their shadow, the more it entwines with your own. Here, Jung's insistence on consciousness becomes essential. To become conscious is to draw a boundary, not of cruelty, but of clarity. To say, "This contempt I feel is not mine, it is the reflection of another's shadow. I will not mistake it for my own truth." Such recognition is not abandonment, it is self-preservation. Without it, you risk living a life shaped by someone else's hatred, carrying wounds that were never yours. Yet, there is a paradox. Even as you disentangle yourself from their shadow, you cannot escape seeing that your own shadow is entangled with theirs. Jung insisted that we must never believe ourselves innocent of the forces we condemn in others. The hatred we sense may awaken anger, resentment, or even hatred within us. Their hostility may summon our own shadow, forcing us to confront the parts of ourselves we, too, have exiled. In this sense, hidden hatred becomes a mirror. Painful, but also revelatory. It shows us how we are vulnerable to absorption, how we betray ourselves for the comfort of closeness, how we refuse to name what is real out of fear of loneliness. To see this clearly is not to despair, it is to reclaim the authority of our soul. Because if their hatred has crossed into you, it can be released. If their shadow has infected your self-image, it can be recognized, named, and returned. The psyche, once aware, can separate what belongs to it from what does not. In this act, something vital happens: you reclaim yourself. This reclamation is not dramatic. It is slow, quiet, but profound. It begins with the smallest refusal, to apologize for your joy, to dim your achievements, to shrink your presence. It grows into the courage to face the truth without denial, to admit that love is not always pure, and that hatred can live even in those we hold dearest. It culminates in the strength to carry your own shadow, without allowing the shadows of others to devour you. Jung believed that no one escapes shadow work. Hidden hatred from those close to us is one way life forces us to confront it. It is painful, but also an invitation to awaken, to separate illusion from reality, to claim the dignity of your being even when others cannot love it without envy. So, when their hatred becomes your shadow, you have a choice: to live under its weight, mistaking it for your own voice, or to rise in the clarity of consciousness, and say, "This darkness is not mine. I will see it, I will understand it, but I will not carry it within me." In this choice lies freedom. Every encounter with hidden hatred, as devastating as it feels, carries within it the seed of transformation. For Jung, life was not about avoiding the shadow, but about facing it until its presence no longer controlled us. When someone close secretly despises you, it is a wound, but also a call to awaken and see clearly what love and human connection truly mean. The truth is that hatred, envy, and resentment will always exist in human bonds. They cannot be eradicated because they are part of the psyche's fabric. The person who secretly despises you is not simply an enemy wearing a mask. They are a soul struggling with their own fractures, caught in the same web of contradictions that binds us all. Recognizing this does not excuse their actions, but it helps us step away from bitterness. Jung often spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the hidden parts of ourselves. Facing hatred from those closest to us is part of this work because it forces us to confront both the shadows of others and the shadows within ourselves. Their envy may awaken our pride. Their contempt may summon our own anger. Their hostility may mirror our fear of rejection. To see these reactions clearly is to begin to understand the hidden depths of our own soul. But individuation is not only inner work, it is also the art of relationship. It teaches us that closeness must not come at the cost of clarity. To love someone truly does not mean denying the resentment that lies beneath the surface. It means seeing it, naming it, and choosing how much of your spirit you can entrust to them. Some bonds will survive this clarity, deepening into relationships where both light and shadow are acknowledged. Others will not, and in those cases, the wisdom is in letting go, not clinging to an illusion. There is freedom in this. Once you accept that even those who love you may sometimes despise you, you no longer live in the fragility of constant reassurance. You no longer demand purity from human hearts, nor do you hide from their contradictions. You begin to walk through relationships with open eyes, able to cherish affection when it is genuine and release it when it corrodes into something toxic. Perhaps most importantly, you learn not to fear the shadow itself. Hidden hatred is painful, but it is also a mirror, showing us where illusion still binds us, where we still confuse the mask for the truth, and where we still expect perfection from those who are as broken and divided as we are. To see this clearly is not cynicism, it is maturity. In the end, Jung would say that the goal is not to live a life free from hatred, but to live a life where hatred, once revealed, no longer imprisons you. You learn to carry your own worth so firmly that the shadows of others cannot rewrite it. You learn to look at those who secretly despise you not with naivety, but with clarity, and sometimes even with compassion, knowing that their hostility is often the face of their own suffering. This does not mean staying in harm's way. Compassion without boundaries is simply self-destruction. True wisdom is knowing when to remain and when to step away, when to offer patience and when to preserve your soul. For Jung, the task of consciousness was always to bring light where there was darkness, not to be consumed by it. The lesson is this: the people closest to you may carry shadows that turn against you. They may smile while resenting, embrace while envying, love while secretly hating. This is part of the human condition. But their shadows do not need to define you. Their hidden hatred does not need to become your prison. By seeing it clearly, by separating what belongs to them from what belongs to you, by refusing to carry what is not yours, you begin to live with a deeper kind of freedom. Hidden hatred becomes, then, not just a wound, but a teacher. It strips away illusions, hardens your clarity, and strengthens your spirit. It shows you the truth of human hearts, that love and hate, devotion and envy, tenderness and resentment all live side by side. To see this is to awaken, and to awaken is to live not in fear of shadows, but in the strength of knowing that even in their presence, your light endures. And in the quiet aftermath of such recognition, there is peace. Not the naive peace of believing everyone loves us without fracture, but the mature peace of knowing that even when hatred hides in familiar faces, we have the strength to face it, learn from it, and remain whole. Life has a way of carrying us forward before we stop to ask where we are going. We are born into expectations. The moment we take our first steps, a path is already waiting, laid out by parents, culture, and society's invisible rules. We learn how to behave, fit in, and be acceptable. Little by little, we create a version of ourselves that is easier for the world to handle. We smile when expected, speak when safe, and hide the parts of us that don't get approval. For years it works. We navigate school, jobs, and relationships. People nod in approval. On paper, life looks fine. But deep inside, a quiet unease lingers. Carl Jung recognized this unease as the quiet voice of the self. Not the self we introduce to others, not the carefully maintained image, but the totality of who we are when the masks fall. He believed that until we truly meet this self, we are not living, we are performing. And performances, however convincing, cannot feed the soul. Finding yourself, in Jung's sense, is not an inspirational slogan, a weekend retreat, or a sudden rush of motivation. It is a slow, often painful journey. It begins when we realize the life we are living does not feel like our own. Maybe we notice it upon waking each morning, feeling nothing about the day ahead. Maybe we notice it when achievements bring less joy than they should. Maybe it appears as a dull, inexplicable sadness. Whatever the form, that discomfort is the first signal that the mask is cracking. Here is the dangerous part. The world will tell us to ignore it. It will tell us to keep going, to be grateful, to stay the course. It will promise that the unease will fade. But Jung knew the opposite is true. Ignore it, and it grows. Suppress it, and it waits. One day, it will break through uncontrollably, in burnout, depression, or a collapse of the life we thought was secure. To truly find ourselves, we must turn toward this discomfort. We must let go of the idea that our value comes from meeting others' expectations. We must honestly examine the parts of ourselves we have hidden, even from ourselves. Jung called this confrontation individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating all the lost and denied parts of our being. It is not neat or tidy. It will challenge the stories we have lived by and may make those around us uncomfortable. But this is the price of living our own life instead of the one we inherited. Most people never take this path. They choose comfort over authenticity, stability over truth. They tell themselves it's not the right time, they have too many responsibilities, or change is too risky. But those who do take the journey discover something the rest will never know, the sense of being fully alive. Every action, choice, and breath begins to feel different. We no longer move through life as shadows of ourselves. We become solid, present, unshakable. Jung believed this moment, when we are no longer defined by our roles, but by the truth we live, is the real beginning of life. Before it we exist. After it we live. There is a reason most people never truly find themselves. The road leads straight into the place they fear most, their own shadow. For Jung, the shadow was everything we hide from others and ourselves. It is the anger we deny, the envy we pretend isn't there, and the weakness we mask with strength. It is the truth that we are not only good, kind, and rational, but also selfish, jealous, impulsive, and fragile. Society teaches us to bury these parts, to cover them with politeness and ambition. For a while it works. But buried things don't disappear, they wait. We see it in sudden bursts of emotion that don't make sense, in overreacting to small slights, and in disturbing dreams we can't quite explain. We see it in the patterns we repeat even when they hurt us. These are not random. They are messages from the shadow, the parts of ourselves we have locked away, demanding to be acknowledged. The tragedy is that most people think the shadow is an enemy to be destroyed. Jung argued the opposite. The shadow is not there to ruin us, but to complete us. Until we face it, we are only half a person, a performance, carefully edited to look good in the light, but always haunted by what lurks in the dark. To meet your shadow is to stop pretending. It is to admit you are capable of cruelty, that you can be petty, and that you have undesirable desires. It is to acknowledge that the qualities you despise in others often live inside you as well. This is not easy. It will dismantle your illusions and shatter the image you've worked so hard to maintain. But in the rubble, you will find something far more valuable, the truth. Once you begin this work, the world will look different. You will notice the masks people wear, the fear behind their anger, and the insecurity behind their arrogance. You will stop taking things at face value and slowly stop needing to defend your own mask, because you will know that what is dark in you does not make you unworthy, but whole. Jung warned that this process has a cost. People may not understand you. Some will leave, unable to reconcile the person they thought you were with the person you are becoming. You may find yourself alone for stretches of the journey. But solitude, in this context, is not emptiness, but space. Space to see yourself without distortion, to listen without the noise of other people's expectations. The shadow is also where your hidden strength lives, the assertiveness you were taught to suppress, the creativity you dismissed as impractical, and the passion you buried under responsibility. When you reclaim these, life expands. Decisions feel less forced. Relationships feel less like negotiations and more like genuine connections. You stop chasing approval because you already have your own. This is why Jung said life begins when you find yourself, because to truly find yourself, you must integrate what you have rejected. You must bring light to what you have kept in the dark. Only then do you stop being divided against yourself. Only then does your energy stop leaking into maintaining masks and start flowing into living. Here is the paradox. The parts of yourself you feared most often become the source of your freedom. The anger you thought was dangerous becomes the boundary that protects you. The selfishness you condemn becomes the self-respect that saves you from exploitation. The vulnerability you hid becomes the bridge that allows others to truly know you. The shadow is not the end of the journey, but the gate you must pass through. On the other side is a life not dictated by fear, approval, or the need to fit in. It is a life that feels solid, where your choices are not reactions but expressions of who you are. Most people will never open that gate. But for those who do, there is no going back. Once you have seen yourself fully, light and shadow together, you cannot return to pretending. You cannot shrink to fit the life you lived before. You carry yourself differently. You speak differently. You are not easily manipulated. You no longer confuse comfort with happiness. And in that moment, when you stand as a whole person for the first time, you understand what Jung meant. Everything before this was a rehearsal. Now, finally, once the shadow is faced and integrated, the journey doesn't end, it changes shape. The chaos once feared becomes raw material, and the task is to shape it into something reflecting your true being. Jung called this process individuation, the slow, patient work of becoming an undivided person. Individuation is not perfection. It does not mean becoming flawless or immune to pain. It means becoming real. It means your inner life and outer life begin to match. You are no longer acting out a script, you are writing it as you go. And yet, this is not a path you control in the way you might control a career or a project. You cannot force individuation. You can only cooperate with it. You can only listen to what life brings and respond with honesty instead of habit. In the early stages, individuation can feel like dismantling a building while still living in it. Old beliefs collapse. Friendships change shape or disappear. Careers shift direction. Sometimes, it feels as if everything you used to stand on is gone. This is why so many people turn back. They prefer the familiar discomfort of the mask to the unpredictable terrain of authenticity. But those who continue find that, piece by piece, the rubble becomes the foundation of something far stronger. Jung believed that dreams often act as guides in this stage. They show the parts of ourselves still waiting to be acknowledged. A dream of a locked room might signal an unexplored talent or memory. A dream of being chased might point to fears still hidden. Paying attention to these messages is not superstition, it is a way of letting the unconscious speak. Individuation is not only the work of the conscious mind, it is a dialogue between what you know about yourself and what you have yet to know. As you move deeper into this process, a strange thing happens. You begin to accept contradictions within yourself. You can be strong and gentle, logical and intuitive, ambitious and content. Before, you might have tried to choose one side and reject the other, but individuation teaches that wholeness is not about choosing. It is about holding your light and shadow together without letting them tear you apart. This acceptance makes you harder to manipulate because you no longer fear your own complexity. Individuation also changes how you see others. You stop demanding they play the roles you want. You start seeing the masks they wear not as deceit but as protection. You realize everyone is carrying a private war within them, and judgment gives way to understanding. This doesn't mean tolerating harm, but it does mean recognizing that most cruelty is born from unacknowledged pain. This stage can last years, even decades. Jung himself saw individuation as a lifelong process. It is not a goal you tick off, it is the way you live. Each challenge, each loss, each unexpected turn becomes an invitation to become more whole. The work never truly ends, but it changes you so deeply that you stop fearing its endlessness. You see that growth is not a chore, it is the very rhythm of being alive. There is a deep peace that begins to take root. Not the fragile peace that depends on everything going well, but the grounded peace that comes from knowing you can face whatever comes. You have met your shadow. You have walked through loss. You have watched parts of your identity die and found that you did not die with them. That knowledge is unshakable. It cannot be taken from you because it is not based on circumstance. It is based on the truth of who you are. And this is the quiet irony of Jung's insight. The journey to find yourself often begins in pain, in the shattering of illusions, in the dismantling of what you thought life was. But as you keep walking, you discover that what you feared losing was never truly you. And what you gain, a self that is whole, unafraid of its own depths, is worth more than every false comfort you left behind. At this point, life feels different in ways that are hard to explain to those who haven't walked the path. You don't need to fill every silence. You don't need to win every argument. You are no longer at war with yourself, and so you are no longer at war with the world. You can sit with uncertainty without rushing to resolve it. You can face conflict without being consumed by it. You can be with people without losing yourself in them. This is the point at which many people realize that finding yourself was never about arriving at a fixed identity. It was about learning to live in truth, moment by moment, no matter how that truth changes. You become like a tree, deeply rooted yet able to bend with the wind. And in this rootedness, in this deep alignment between who you are inside and how you live outside, you finally understand what it means to be alive. When Jung said life begins when you find yourself, he wasn't talking about a single event. He was talking about this, the slow, unending unfolding of your true nature. A life in which you do not need to escape yourself because you have become your own home. When you begin to live as yourself, truly yourself, everything you once knew looks different. It is as if the lenses you wore all your life have been taken off, and you suddenly see the world without distortion. The change is subtle at first, but it touches everything: how you love, work, dream, and face the end of things. In relationships, the difference is profound. Before, you may have loved with an undercurrent of fear of rejection, abandonment, and not being enough. You might have molded yourself into what you thought the other person wanted, biting your tongue when you disagreed and pretending to be less complicated. Now that fear dissolves. You no longer seek love to prove your worth. You share love as an extension of your wholeness. This doesn't mean you become indifferent. In fact, the opposite occurs. Your love deepens, but it's no longer desperate. You give without the hidden demand that the other person complete you because you have already completed yourself. This changes the kind of love you accept. You stop clinging to relationships that drain you. You no longer mistake intensity for intimacy or drama for passion. You can walk away from unhealthy relationships without turning it into a war because you understand that letting go is not failure, but a form of loyalty to your soul. The people who remain in your life see you as you are, not as they wish you to be. These connections are quieter and steadier, but they run deep. Work transforms as well. You may still have the same job, title, and daily routine, but your relationship to it shifts. Before, work may have been a way to gain approval or fill the emptiness. Now, it becomes an expression of who you are, or at least a means of supporting your chosen life. You begin to notice when your work aligns with your values and when it doesn't. The hunger for meaningless achievement fades, replaced by the desire to create something real, something that leaves a trace beyond numbers and accolades. Sometimes this leads to bold changes, a career shift, a return to a once abandoned passion, a refusal to compromise your integrity for a paycheck. Other times, it is quieter, a change in how you approach the same work, infusing it with presence rather than rushing through it. Either way, you stop seeing work as a measure of your identity. It is no longer the stage where you prove yourself, but one of many arenas where your true self can act. Even your relationship with time changes. When lost in the mask, you might have been in constant hurry, as if life was something to be won. Now you begin to live in longer breaths. You can sit with a moment without trying to turn it into something else. The urge to constantly compare yourself to others fades, replaced by the quiet realization that there is no race. Inevitably, there is the question of mortality. The old self might have feared death as the ultimate loss. But once you have found yourself, death takes on a different meaning. It is no longer the enemy. It is the reminder that life was always temporary, and what matters is not how long you live, but how fully you live. This awareness strips away the trivial. Arguments you once obsessed over dissolve. Petty grudges lose their grip. You begin to measure your days not by how much you get done, but by how much of yourself you bring into them. This doesn't make you fearless in the face of death, but it does make you fearless in the face of life. You stop holding back. You stop waiting for the right time to speak, act, or love. You see clearly that the right time is now because now is all you ever truly have. People may notice the change in you, though they may not be able to name it. They might say you seem calmer, stronger, or more present. Some will be drawn to it. Others will be unsettled because your presence reminds them of the masks they are still wearing. You will have to accept that you cannot make them take their masks off. The work of finding oneself cannot be done for another person. You can only live as an example, a quiet reminder that there is another way to be. Even in this new life, there will still be challenges. Old wounds will resurface. Loss will come. Fear will knock again. But the difference is that you meet these things as yourself, not as a role you're playing. You face them with the same honesty you used to avoid, and in doing so, they lose their power to shatter you. You understand that the storms will come and go, but your roots run deep enough to hold you steady. Finding yourself is not a single event. It is the creation of a foundation that no one else can give you or take away. It is living in such a way that, no matter what changes on the surface, your core remains intact. It is waking up each day not asking, "What do they want from me?" but "What is true for me today?" This is the freedom Jung was pointing to, the freedom to live without pretending, to act without betraying yourself, to die without feeling that you never truly lived. Once you taste it, there is no going back because you finally understand that everything you thought was life before was just a shadow. This is life. There comes a moment, often without ceremony, when you realize the search is over. Not because life has given you every answer, but because you no longer need to chase them. You have found the one thing you were looking for all along, yourself. It doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like standing in the center of a still, vast landscape and breathing for the first time without the weight on your chest. You look back on the years you spent running toward approval, running from pain, running in circles around the same patterns, and you see it all clearly. The struggles, the mistakes, the betrayals, the restless longing, they were not detours. They were the path. They were the very forces that broke the shell you mistook for your life and pushed you into the open. You understand now why Jung never spoke of this journey as easy or glamorous. It is not about polishing the surface. It is about tearing down the false walls inside you until nothing stands between you and the truth. It is about walking into rooms in your soul you swore you'd never enter, sitting with the ghosts you tried to bury, and learning their names. And in doing so, you realize they were never there to destroy you. They were there to lead you home. Living as yourself does not mean life stops hurting. It means the hurt no longer defines you. Pain becomes something you move through, not something you drown in. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this showing me?" Joy changes too. It becomes quieter, deeper. It is no longer tied to big wins or fleeting highs, but to moments so simple they might have passed unnoticed before. Sunlight spilling into your room in the morning, the sound of someone you love laughing, the feeling of being exactly where you are meant to be, even if nothing is perfect. You notice that you carry yourself differently now. You don't rush to fill silence because silence is no longer uncomfortable. You don't rush to defend yourself from misunderstanding because your worth is no longer up for debate. You don't try to convince others to see what you see because you understand that everyone must walk their own road at their own pace. The old urgency to prove yourself, to win, to be right, has dissolved into something steadier, a quiet certainty that you are enough, exactly as you are. And perhaps the most profound change is this: you are no longer afraid of endings. You know that everything in life is temporary, the seasons, the roles you play, even this body you inhabit. But instead of clinging in fear, you learn to hold things gently, to love fully while you have them, and to let go when it is time. You begin to see endings not as failures, but as thresholds. You crossed many to arrive here, and you will cross many more. And each time, you will carry yourself across because you are your own home now. This is why Jung said life begins when you find yourself. Before, you were moving, but not living. You were breathing, but not awake. You were a shadow of your own potential. Now you are here, whole, awake, present. And in this wholeness, life becomes simpler and richer at once. You stop searching for meaning as if it were hidden somewhere else because you see that meaning is something you create every day by the way you live, love, and face the world. You will still have days when you forget, days when the mask tries to return, days when old fears knock on the door. But now you know the way back. You know that you can walk through the dark and not lose yourself. You know that no matter what happens, success or failure, gain or loss, you will not abandon who you are. That knowledge is your anchor. It is your freedom. And so, the journey ends where it truly begins, not with the discovery of some new, perfect self, but with the embrace of the self that was there all along, waiting for you to come home. Everything before was a rehearsal. This is your life. And it is yours at last. There comes a moment in life, often after years of being hurt, misunderstood, or taken for granted, when something inside you quietly decides, enough. It's not a loud decision. There's no shouting, no dramatic goodbye, no slamming of doors. It's a slow, steady realization that you can't keep living the same way, giving the same chances, and ignoring the same signs. When that moment arrives, everything begins to change. Carl Jung understood this shift. He believed that pain isn't just something that happens to us, it's something that reveals us. Every wound, every disappointment, and every betrayal are not just accidents in your story. They are teachers. Reluctant teachers, perhaps, but teachers all the same. They shape how you see the world and yourself. If you listen closely, they can teach you how to ensure nothing and nobody will ever hurt you in the same way again. The first step is realizing you cannot control the actions of others. You can't stop people from lying, leaving, or breaking promises. The world will not become gentle just because you are. What you can control is whether you hand them the weapon, whether you leave your heart unguarded in the hands of someone who has already dropped it. This is where the deeper work begins, not in becoming cold or detached, but in becoming rooted. You start to anchor yourself in a sense of worth that no one can give or take away. You stop building your peace in other people's houses. If your joy depends on someone else's behavior, then your joy belongs to them, not you. At first, this can feel unnatural. If you've spent your life trusting too easily or loving without limits, setting boundaries might feel like closing the door to sunlight. But Jung would remind you, boundaries are not walls to keep love out. They are gates to let the right love in. You're not becoming harder, you're becoming more intentional. You begin to see the patterns. How some people only appear when they need something. How certain words are followed by the same empty actions. You stop explaining away the red flags, stop pretending you didn't hear what was said, and stop forgiving the same wound repeatedly as if repetition will make it less sharp. Once you decide that nothing and nobody will ever hurt you the same way again, you start treating your time and your heart differently. You don't rush to respond to every call for attention. You no longer confuse familiarity with loyalty. You recognize that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to walk away without making a speech, proving a point, or leaving the door half open. People might notice this change. Some will call it strength. Some will call it selfishness. What they're really seeing is the shift from living reactively to living deliberately. You're no longer making choices out of fear of losing someone. You're making choices out of respect for yourself. In this shift, something remarkable happens. You stop being so breakable. It's not that pain will never find you again. It's that when it does, it will no longer have a home inside you. You'll feel it, acknowledge it, and let it pass without letting it root itself in your identity. That's the quiet power Jung spoke of, the power to let life touch you without letting it destroy you. The world will always have sharp edges. There will always be people who misunderstand you, disappoint you, and even hurt you. But when you have done the inner work, when you have faced your own shadows and built your own foundation, those sharp edges no longer cut as deep. You no longer bleed the same way. One day, you realize, not as a declaration, but as a simple fact, nothing and nobody will ever hurt you like before. When you reach that quiet turning point, the moment you decide I will not be hurt like that again, life doesn't suddenly become peaceful. It becomes revealing. The world begins to test your decision. Old wounds resurface in new disguises. People you've known for years might suddenly push against your new boundaries. Someone might offer the same poisoned kindness you've tasted before, wrapped in prettier words. In those moments, you have a choice: slip back into old patterns or stand your ground and live differently. Carl Jung would say this is where true individuation begins. The surface change, pulling back, creating distance, saying, "No," is only the doorway. The deeper, inner work happens next. You examine why you allowed yourself to be hurt before, not to blame yourself, but to understand yourself. You ask questions you might have avoided your whole life. Was I afraid of being alone? Did I confuse attention with love? Did I mistake tolerance for kindness? You begin to see how much of your suffering stemmed not just from what others did, but from what you allowed because you didn't know your own value. This realization doesn't crush you, it frees you. Because if you played a part in letting the pain in, you also have the power to close that door forever. One of the most powerful shifts is in how you listen. Before, you may have quickly believed promises, clinging to words as proof. Now you watch what people do. You notice patterns instead of excuses. You measure intentions by consistency, not charm. In doing so, you strip away illusions faster. You no longer waste years waiting for someone to become who they promised to be in a single moment. This doesn't make you cynical, it makes you clear. You still believe in love, kindness, and connection, but you no longer believe they require you to abandon yourself. You stop over-explaining your worth. You stop begging for someone to see you. You stop trying to prove you are worth staying for. Here, something extraordinary happens. The hurt you once carried becomes a kind of wisdom. You sense when someone's energy is unsafe before it cuts deep. You feel the tone behind their words, the truth behind their smiles. Instead of trying to change them, you simply step away. At first, stepping away can feel lonely. Your circle might become smaller. The constant noise of people's needs, dramas, and demands quiets. You might even wonder if you've become too guarded. But slowly, you notice what replaces that noise: peace. The absence of chaos is not emptiness, it is space. In that space, you find yourself again. Jung often wrote about the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves we avoid. Much of our pain comes from not confronting our own shadow, from pretending it isn't there. When you decide nothing and nobody will hurt you again, part of that decision is finally meeting your own shadow. You admit the ways you've betrayed yourself, the times you stayed too long, gave too much, or ignored the inner voice that said leave. In acknowledging this, you take away its power to keep repeating. Your daily life shifts in ways outsiders might not notice, but you feel them deeply. You pause before agreeing. You take time before responding to messages. You check in with yourself before committing to someone else's plan. You no longer feel the constant rush to be there for everyone at the cost of being there for yourself. This change permeates every corner of your existence. Your mornings feel different because they no longer begin with a flood of other people's urgencies. You drink your coffee slowly. You sit in stillness. You let your mind wander without instantly resorting to distractions. Your evenings are no longer filled with the exhaustion of having carried too much. You sleep lighter, not because life is perfect, but because you no longer live in constant alert, waiting for the next hurt. People who once leaned on your availability may pull away when they realize you will no longer carry them endlessly. This can sting initially, but then you realize, if your presence depended on your self-sacrifice, it was never true closeness. Now, the people who remain value you for who you are, not for what you can give without limits. The greatest strength you build is emotional sovereignty. You stop outsourcing your sense of worth. You stop letting someone's opinion shift your self-image. If someone misunderstands you, you let them. If someone disapproves, you don't scramble to win them back. You begin to see that you can be misunderstood and still be whole, disliked and still be worthy. This is the true essence of never being hurt the same way again. It's not that life stops testing you. It's that your foundation is no longer fragile. You can bend without breaking. You can care without collapsing. You can love without losing yourself. Jung would say you've moved from living in reaction to living in alignment. The people in your life now meet you where you are, not where they can take from you. The situations you enter serve your growth, not your destruction. When pain arrives, because pain is inevitable, it meets a version of you it cannot dismantle. You've become your own anchor. Your peace is not at the mercy of anyone else's storms. When you finally understand this, you realize the truth. The day you decided to protect your heart was not the day you built walls. It was the day you built a home within yourself so strong, so steady, that no one could tear it down. There is a point in the journey where you look back at the person you used to be, the one who tolerated so much, who bent until they broke, who mistook exhaustion for love, and you barely recognize them. Not because you have erased them, but because you have transformed them. You understand now that every version of you, even the one who allowed too much, was doing the best they could with what they knew. But now you know better. And knowing better changes everything. The first great shift is in your relationship with yourself. Before, you may have seen yourself only through the eyes of others, as someone's friend, someone's partner, someone's helper. Now you see yourself as your own center. You are no longer defined by what you can give away, but by what you choose to create and protect. You wake up in the morning not asking, "Who needs me today?" but asking, "What do I need today to remain whole?" Carl Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. For many, the pain they have endured comes from avoiding that acceptance, from chasing approval, love, or validation outside of themselves. But when you decide that nothing and nobody will hurt you again, part of that decision is choosing to meet yourself fully. You face your flaws without shame, your wounds without hiding, your dreams without shrinking. And in that acceptance, you find something unshakable, the knowledge that you are enough as you are, even if nobody else claps for you. With this inner shift, your outer world transforms in ways that feel almost magical, though there is nothing mystical about it. People sense boundaries even when you don't announce them. You carry yourself differently, and that energy tells the world how to treat you. Those who once saw you as a constant source of comfort may try to test your limits, but they quickly realize that the old ways no longer work. You do not yell, you do not plead, you simply don't participate in dynamics that drain you. This is where peace becomes your default state. Not the fragile peace you had before, the kind that depended on everyone else behaving, but a peace that is anchored in your own choices. And because it's yours, no one can take it from you. In this new way of living, pain still exists, but it's lighter. If someone leaves, you don't crumble because you know you will still wake up whole. If someone betrays you, you don't seek revenge because you know that what they have broken is their own integrity, not yours. If life throws a storm your way, you bend with it instead of snapping under it. There is also a new kind of joy here, not the fleeting high of someone's approval, but the steady warmth of self-respect. You take long walks not to clear your head of someone else's chaos, but simply because you enjoy the quiet. You create things not to impress, but to express. You give to others not out of obligation, but from overflow. Your life becomes less about reaction and more about intention. And perhaps the most powerful transformation is this: you no longer see hurt as something to be feared. You see it as something you have the tools to navigate. The idea that nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again is not about building a fortress where nothing can touch you. It's about building a self so grounded that whatever touches you cannot destroy you. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires integration of both light and shadow. In this final stage, you have done exactly that. You know your own darkness, the insecurities, the fears, the habits that once kept you trapped, and instead of letting them rule you, you have made peace with them. They no longer control your choices. You also know your light, your kindness, your resilience, your ability to love deeply, and you no longer give it away recklessly. This changes your relationships forever. You no longer chase people. You no longer explain yourself to those determined to misunderstand you. You no longer audition for love that should be freely given. Instead, you attract, not through effort, but through authenticity. The ones who come now are not drawn to what they can take, but to what they can share. The smaller circle you now keep is not a loss, it is a garden. Fewer people, but deeper roots. Conversations that feed you, not starve you. Presence that comforts, not drains. And because you are no longer scattering yourself to the wind, the connections you do have grow stronger, richer, more enduring. This is also where you find the courage to dream again. When you were constantly hurt, survival was your only focus, keeping yourself together between blows. But now that you have built this foundation of self-protection and self-respect, you have the energy to build something new. You start projects you once thought you weren't good enough for. You explore paths you once thought were closed. You try, not because you are sure of success, but because failure no longer threatens your sense of self. And in the quiet moments, you realize the greatest victory of all: you can finally be soft without fear. You can laugh without bracing for loss. You can love without surrendering your soul. You can open your heart knowing that if someone mishandles it, you have the strength to take it back whole. This is the kind of power Jung admired, not dominance over others, but sovereignty over yourself. The power to live in the world fully, to love it deeply, without being ruled by its cruelty. To walk through life not untouched, but unbroken. And so one day, without ceremony, you catch yourself smiling for no reason. Not because someone gave you something, not because life is perfect, but because you know that you are free. And in that moment you understand, the promise you made to yourself, that nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again, was not a shield you built against the world. It was a vow to live so deeply rooted in your own worth that even when the world tries to wound you, you remain whole. When you stop being constantly available, a subtle but powerful shift occurs both externally and internally. Carl Jung understood this. Energy, time, and presence are finite resources, yet many live as if they are not. We answer every call, respond to every message, and agree to every favor, draining ourselves in the process. Initially, it feels noble. You are the dependable one, the friend always present, the partner always sacrificing, the worker always saying yes. Over time, your value becomes invisible, not because you are worth less, but because constant availability breeds being taken for granted. Jung warned against this. Endless accessibility invites the world to forget your value. Consider water. A constantly flowing spring is often overlooked. Its coolness, clarity, and life-giving properties are taken for granted. Only when it runs dry, even briefly, is its true worth realized. The same applies to people. When you step back and remove your constant presence, the world adjusts. Initially, there might be resistance. People might question your decreased responsiveness. Some might mistake boundaries for rejection. But as the noise fades, the wrong people drift away, and the right ones lean in. Those who truly value you will make the effort to connect. Those attached only to your availability will disappear. Jung would consider this a revelation, not a loss. Life reveals who truly belongs and who is merely passing through. By ceasing constant availability, you stop scattering your energy and start investing it wisely. You transition from a background character in others' stories to the main character in your own. Calm arrives gradually. The silence might feel strange, even uncomfortable. But within that space, you reconnect with your thoughts, rediscover abandoned hobbies and postponed dreams, and unearth parts of yourself buried under others' needs. Relationships shift, priorities sharpen, and you realize the world didn't fall apart without your constant presence. This isn't about withdrawing from anger or resentment, but about protecting your essential energy. Jung often discussed individuation, becoming your true self. Part of this process involves recognizing that worth isn't tied to availability. You can be kind without being constant, present without being permanent, and love deeply without abandoning yourself. The quiet truth is that ceasing constant availability doesn't diminish love, it refines it. The remaining love doesn't depend on your convenience, but on connection. This, Jung would argue, marks the beginning of authentic living, free from obligation. When you step back from being endlessly available, the first thing you notice is the shift in how people treat your absence. At first, they reach for you as they always have, with the same frequency and expectation. But when you don't answer right away, when you take time for yourself instead of immediately tending to their needs, you begin to see the truth of their relationship with you. Some will send another message softer and more thoughtful. Others will stop reaching out entirely. That is your first quiet revelation. Not everyone in your life was there for you. Many were there for the version of you that was always accessible and ready to give. Carl Jung would call this the unveiling of shadow relationships, connections that looked whole but were held together by convenience, not depth. When you stop being constantly available, you give these connections a chance to reveal their true nature. While this can hurt initially, it is also a strange kind of liberation. You no longer carry the invisible weight of keeping certain people in your life simply because they've always been there. There's also a more subtle shift. Your perception of yourself begins to change. When you've lived in a constant state of being needed, your sense of worth becomes tangled with other people's demands. You start to feel important only when you are busy, when your phone is buzzing, when someone is asking you for something. But when you step away, you are forced to find your worth elsewhere. At first, this can feel like emptiness. Then, slowly, it becomes spaciousness. In that spaciousness, you rediscover parts of yourself you forgot existed. You might pick up a book you haven't touched in years. You might sit in a cafe alone without checking your phone. You might walk under the evening sky with no plan or urgency, simply breathing in the cool air. In these moments, you begin to feel something you may not have felt in a long time, a quiet self-sufficiency. You realize you don't need constant affirmation or activity to feel alive. Your own company is enough. Here's where the world begins to respond differently. When people see that you are not constantly available, you stop being taken for granted. Your time becomes something to be cherished, not assumed. Your presence becomes a gift, not a habit. The conversations you do have feel richer and more intentional because you are no longer spreading yourself thin. People who truly care will notice your absence, not out of entitlement, but out of genuine connection. They will ask, "How have you been?" and actually mean it. Jung spoke often of the importance of boundaries, framing it through the lens of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, separate from the masks you wear for society. He believed that if you are always available to others, you are never truly available to yourself. By stepping back, you are not only protecting your energy but also reclaiming your identity. You stop living as a constant responder and start living as a conscious creator of your own life. There's another transformation, one you might not expect. When you stop giving all of your time away, you become more selective about where you place it. When you choose to be present for someone, they can feel the difference. Your presence becomes more focused and genuine. You are no longer half listening while thinking about the next message you have to answer. You are there, fully, and this depth of attention creates a different kind of intimacy, one that can't exist when you're spread thin. It's also in this stage that you start to see who you have been to yourself all along. Were you treating yourself like someone worth protecting? Or were you exhausting yourself to prove your worth to others? For many, the honest answer is painful. Jung would say that the greatest work you can do is to turn inward and face that truth without flinching. To ask, if I gave myself the same care, loyalty, and availability I give to others, how different would my life be? Perhaps the most surprising change is this. When you stop being constantly available, you find that you no longer need constant validation. You learn to sit with your own thoughts without rushing to share them. You learn to process your feelings without needing someone else to approve them. You become comfortable with the idea that some parts of your life are yours alone, not to be explained, justified, or broadcast. This is not withdrawal from life, it is a deeper entry into it. You are not cutting people off out of bitterness. You are filtering out the noise so you can hear the music. You are not abandoning others. You are refusing to abandon yourself. In time, the right people, the ones who respect your boundaries, cherish your presence, and see your value without constant reminders, will become the steady few you carry forward. When you stop being endlessly available, the world doesn't end. It reorganizes. The wrong things fall away. The right things grow stronger. For the first time in a long time, you begin to live on your own terms, not as a reaction to every demand around you, but as an expression of the quiet, steady truth of who you are. The most profound change that comes from ceasing to be endlessly available is not in how others perceive you, but in how you perceive the entire structure of your life. You begin to recognize previously invisible patterns, the friendships that existed only because you carried them, the conversations that drained instead of nourished you, and the subtle guilt you felt whenever you said no. You begin to ask yourself questions you've avoided for years. Why was I so afraid to step back? Why did I believe my constant presence was the only thing holding everything together? Carl Jung understood that much of our overavailability stems from the unconscious fear of being forgotten, unloved, or replaced. We think, if I'm not always there, they'll find someone else. But here is the hard truth. If your value to someone depends entirely on your constant accessibility, they never truly valued you, only the convenience you provided. Stepping back doesn't push away the wrong people. It reveals who they've been all along. In the early days of reclaiming your time, this truth can feel heavy. Your phone may grow quieter, your social calendar less full. There will be evenings when the silence feels oppressive. You may wonder if you've made a mistake. But here's the hidden gift. In that silence, you begin to hear your own life again. You start noticing details you once rushed past. The way the light falls across your floor in the morning, the texture of your breath when you wake, the clarity of your mind without the constant tug of other people's demands. Slowly, without forcing it, your energy shifts. You begin to stand differently, carrying yourself with a subtle strength that comes from knowing your worth is not tied to anyone's approval or constant contact. People notice this, even if they can't name it. They start treating your time with more care because they sense that you do too. Jung would describe this as individuation reaching a deeper stage, the merging of your conscious self with the parts of you that were once hidden or sacrificed. When you were always available, you were often living in fragments, giving pieces of yourself to everyone else and leaving little for yourself. Now you are gathering those pieces back, one by one, becoming whole. This process doesn't harden you, it softens you. You become more compassionate, but your compassion is no longer reckless. You help where you choose to help, love where you choose to love, give where your soul says yes. Because your giving is no longer endless, it becomes more powerful. The people who receive it feel its depth, knowing you are giving out of true intention, not habit. Your relationships begin to transform. Those built on mutual respect deepen. Those built on dependency fade naturally. You no longer chase people, you let them go, trusting that those meant for you will not require you to burn yourself out to keep their place. Perhaps the most liberating discovery is this: your life is not smaller without constant availability, it is fuller. The empty spaces that once terrified you are now filled with meaning. You read more, create more, sit with your own thoughts, and find they are not your enemy. You walk without rushing, eat without distraction, and begin to live in a rhythm that feels natural to your soul. There will be moments when old habits try to creep back in. A message arrives, and your instinct is to answer immediately. An invitation comes, and you want to say yes without thinking. But now, there is a pause, a breath, and in that pause you ask yourself, do I want this? Or do I feel obligated? This question becomes a compass, guiding you away from automatic sacrifice and toward conscious choice. Over time, people adjust. They learn that you are not someone they can summon at will, but someone whose presence is earned and appreciated. The quality of your interactions rises. You have fewer conversations, but they are richer. You have fewer obligations, but they matter more. You spend less time explaining yourself because your life now speaks for itself. Carl Jung would remind us that the goal is not to become unreachable, but to become intentional. You are still connected to the world, but you refuse to be consumed by it. You are still generous, but your generosity comes from abundance, not exhaustion. You are still loving, but your love is rooted in self-respect. When you look back, you realize something profound. The moment you stopped being endlessly available was the moment your real life began. Not the life built on pleasing others, but the life built on honoring yourself. And because you honored yourself, you were finally able to give the world something better than your constant presence. You gave it your truest presence.